Welcome. You're listening to the Good Girls Don't podcast with Ashley Ray
and Verity Mansfield.
This is the podcast where we smash those rules that we've been taught to follow both as men and women and burn the damn rule book. We're tackling the big issues and the issues nobody wants to talk about, and we'll be fiercely feminist about it.
This podcast is about inspiration, education, compassion, and being the change that you need to see in this world. This podcast is for the trailblazers, the freedom fighters, and the soul igniters, and all the women just like you who are ready to break the good girl rules and be heard.
We acknowledge the traditional custodians of Australia and its First Nations people on which this podcast is produced and consumed. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging.
Get ready for the revolution. It's coming to you now. It's coming to you now. We're gonna sing it, revolution. And they'll never bring us down. No, they'll never bring us down.
Verity, I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, there was just a massive lack of female role models. There was no one to look up to besides the Spice Girls. What about you?
I agree. There was, my biggest role model at the time, I think, was my mum, because there really wasn't very many women in my everyday life that I could, look up to as a role model.
I know. And it's not to say that the role models we did have were bad, but we want to showcase someone. If you're in need of a new role model, if you need to be inspired by someone, which I think we could all use a healthy dose of, then I want to introduce you to Sarah Ireland.
We love Sarah Ireland. So a couple of, I think it was only a couple of weeks ago, we came across this amazing blog when we were actually researching supporting One Girl. And Sarah happens to be the CEO of One Girl, and she wrote this incredible blog, which we will put into the show notes, called Fitting the Mold, Breaking the Mold, and Making it Home in Time for Dinner. And we thought, as a CEO, a female CEO of this incredible humanitarian foundation, who else would be better suited than talking about breaking the good girl rules?
Absolutely. So as CEO of One Girl, Sarah's lobbied both Australian and overseas governments to increase foreign budgets and the intake of refugees, and to prioritise women and girls in their overseas aid programs. As a result of Sarah's advocacy work, the Foreign Minister, Julie Bishop, announced a stronger focus on girls and women in the government's humanitarian strategy and foreign policy, and the Abbott government announced an increase in the intake of Syrian and Iraqi refugees. This advocacy work included lobbying letters to the Foreign Minister and Prime Minister, public petitions, parliamentary briefings and speaking engagements, public vigils, national advertising, and media interviews. This woman is a powerhouse, guys.
She's phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal.
I can't wait. I mean, this interview just blew me away. I was so gobsmacked I could barely squeeze out a single word through the whole thing.
Yeah, she's just an absolute fantastic human being, and I think such a much needed role model. And it's absolutely perfect, I think, that someone like Sarah is the CEO of One Girl, where they're empowering and educating girls in Africa to be educated and to be empowered and to be able, to be all of themselves and to believe in themselves. And we just absolutely loved this conversation. And there was something so beautiful that Sarah kept, I guess, reflecting back on, was this sentence, I don't know what I'm doing, but I really want to learn this. And it was such a beautiful, it should be a quote that we should all sort of be living by. This admittance of vulnerability, of wanting to be a CEO, of wanting to be just so much more, as a female, and being willing to be able to say, I don't know what the hell I'm doing here, but I'm going to take a chance. But, teach me, show me, help me learn. And I just think it's such a beautiful perspective that we could all take on board. And there's so many other juicy things we talked about as well.
I know.
It's this need for more, strong female role models in all of our lives, how we could all step up and be humanitarians in our everyday life, how to, balance saving the world and being at home, in time for dinner, or why having a career shouldn't cost you motherhood. And why CEOs should embrace their vulnerability and flexibility and have the willingness to still learn from the team around.
It's gonna blow your mind to hear what Sarah has to share because it's incredible. So stick around because that's what's coming up on this episode of the Good Girls Don't podcast.
Ashley. Well, I am so excited because we have the amazing Sarah Ireland, and you know how much I absolutely loved her blog. And
Just a smidgen.
And we just had to get her on to have a chat. So she wrote this amazing blog, Fitting the Mold, Breaking the Mold, and Making it home in time for dinner. And I think what's so important about Sarah and the work that she does is the fact that she's this absolute powerhouse. She's a CEO and she's a mum. And this challenging the ideas about what a CEO is and what it means, and being this inspiration that I think so many of us need, whether we're 12 years old or whether, we're in our 20s and starting and as entrepreneurs or getting into business, getting into careers, or whether we're 40 and 50 years old in our careers or businesses, but having these beautiful, inspirational women around us who are breaking the molds about what it means to be a businesswoman and what it means to be a CEO.
Welcome, Sarah Ireland.
Thank you. And thank you for that introduction. It's very nice to be here.
Oh, we're so happy to have you. And so you're the CEO of One Girl. And, that in itself is so beautiful and amazing and inspiring. But how did you fall into this? How did you find out about One Girl? Because you originally were doing work, was it in the UK?
Like many Australians before me, I moved to the UK when I was in my 20s, and I, on a working holiday visa, but I had already been working as a journalist. I, had an undergrad, a master's, and so I really tried to look at work in journalism. Because I really wanted to, that was my passion, was to write, and I really wanted to be a foreign correspondent because I just had this real love of international politics and international development and what was happening in countries all around the world. And I ended up getting a volunteer position with Save the Children in their emergencies department. And I kind of fell into the position a little bit. I had another job, a paying job, and took a volunteer position as a logistician and had no idea what a logistician was.
I was wondering, what's a logistician?
It's a good question. I didn't know either. And it was one of those things where just in the UK, this was, 10, 11 years ago now. And the aid sector, the international development sector, it wasn't a thing in Australia where you could get a paid job, or at least as far as I knew. I grew up in Brisbane, and there weren't that many university degrees that looked at this field in a way that there are today. And so I got to the UK and, really wanted to work in this international space, and found this whole industry that focused on providing support in countries all around the world, either in humanitarian crises, in conflict, or in kind of more longer term settings. And I just thought, this is what I want to do. And I really thought I wanted to do it in a media, communications, journalism type way. Really struggled to even get an interview because I basically hadn't left Australia before. So I didn't have any experience outside of Brisbane, really. And so this volunteer position came up, and even though I had no idea what I would be doing or what the job was, I applied, and for some reason they gave it to me. But that was just the start of this amazing career that I've had in international humanitarian and international aid. And I was actually only in that volunteer role for a month, and a Cyclone Nargis, hit Myanmar in Southeast Asia. And it was one of the biggest cyclones to hit that area in a long time. And it actually impacted, well, it killed a few 100,000 people in Myanmar and affected millions more. And I was sent as part of the emergency response team with Save the Children at the time. And again, really not knowing what I was getting into. I was 25, the youngest international staff member on the team, and just, you know, I really relied on the people around me to guide me, to provide that support. And that was a real eye-opener for me, not just in the work, and looking at what it meant to be an international aid worker, to be an emergency responder in countries like Myanmar, but really looking at how I could work with the local population and the absolute frontline role that they play before somebody like me comes into the country on a plane, and the support role that I play in supporting them to be able to rebuild their own lives after such an enormous cyclone or crisis hit their country. But also really personally, it really shaped how I approached my work. So I was only supposed to be there for a month, and a long-term job came up, and, you know, I put my hand up and said, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I really want to be here. I'm here right now. You don't have to bring anyone in. I really want to learn, and I really want to do this. And I was lucky at the time to be surrounded by people who sort of recognised something in me, maybe, that took a chance on me, but also supported me and answered questions when I asked them, and, you know, helped me figure out what I was doing. But I also decided at that time that I was going to approach things trying to think of solutions myself, and trying to not go to people always with problems, but go to people saying, I've got this real issue. I don't really know what to do. Is this the right way to approach it? Should I do this? Should I do that? And try to be that person that would come up with solutions, rather than just always asking people to provide me with the solutions. And I think that's really helped me through my career in taking new challenges, one of which was this CEO role. I worked in in many countries around the world for about 10 or so years, and I had a child and moved back to Australia, and I was with Save the Children in Australia working on humanitarian advocacy and policy. So looking at how I could work with decision makers, policy makers, governments to create long-lasting change for children and their families. And I was just ready for a bit of a change and had a broad look. I didn't necessarily know exactly what I wanted to do, and I just knew that I wanted to stay involved in the international sector. I knew that I'd seen this amazing impact of education so many times around the world, and especially the amazing things that happen if you educate girls, and not just on their lives, but on the lives of everybody around them. And so when I saw this CEO position at One Girl come up, I, if you've read my blog, you'll see kind of a bit of a thought process, but I loved it. I just thought this organisation looks fantastic, but I really ummed and ahed about whether to apply, because in my mind, who was I to put up my hand for a CEO role? And that sounds crazy now after being in the role.
It sounds crazy to us as outsiders who have known you for about 6 minutes, because we were just reading, and I am going to read this out. So you're currently a humanitarian representative on the Red Cross Australia Victorian International Humanitarian Law Advisory Committee. You have a Bachelor in Journalism, a Master of International Studies in Peace and Conflict Resolution, and you're currently studying a Masters of International Law, plus you've been a recent winner of Pro Bono's 2018 Impact 25 Awards. And it is so, Ashley and I sit there and we're like, yeah, if anyone was going to be a CEO, it probably should be you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, I know. I mean, when somebody else says it, yes, but it's just one of those things, though, that I think you kind of get.
All women go through it, though, don't we? Like, we all are raised to question ourselves, and it's why in classrooms, if a teacher asks the question, more boys than girls will raise their hands, and boys won't even bother raising their hands. A lot of boys will just shout it out. They don't care if they get it wrong, where for us, the girls, especially, I guess, at a psychological level, because we're so relationship orientated, we're so conscious about, our connections and relationships, and, it really impacts on us in our ability to be able to step up and say what we want to say in fear of being wrong or offending someone or upsetting something or getting it, just getting it wrong. And that's why I just absolutely loved your blog, this whole idea of, who was I to put my hand up and say, oh, can I be a CEO?
Yeah, it's so true. And I think that, and I think there's something about the word CEO as well, because, for and for a huge part of my life, and even now when you look at, the number of women CEOs versus male CEOs in top companies, a CEO was synonymous with being male. And so it was funny because when I was working internationally, so in other countries, a career path for me could have been country director for an office of, say, Save the Children or Oxfam or those type of organisations overseas. And I would very happily have applied for a job like that probably would have had a bigger budget than what I currently operate with. And so, and I look at, and more staff, depending on the office that I was country director of. And so if I look at all those other things, I could have actually applied for, in some ways, a much bigger role overseas. And I would have felt really comfortable doing that. But it was something about CEO, and in the context that I'd been, brought up in Australia, that just made me think, who am I to be a CEO? I'm not a CEO. Of course I'm not a CEO. It's a really strange thing to think back on and think that was my thought process, when it's been one of the best jobs I've ever had. And I can't imagine where I would be if I didn't apply for this role, and the work that I have been able to do and the impact that I've been able to have on people's lives in Australia and overseas by being in this role. And I think it would have been personally such a shame for me, but if I hadn't just put in that application and if I hadn't just taken that chance.
Yeah. So what do you think it was for you? What was the turning point where you were in your mind saying, oh, I don't think I can do this, who am I, to then just going like, stuff it, I'm going to email them my resume?
It was my partner. He called me out on it because he sort of he just questioned me, and he made me kind of like what you did before, like when it's somebody else saying it to you. And I'd been talking to him about it for a few days, and the applications were due the next day. And he just kind of looked at me and kind of questioned. And he said, well, why? He's like, take me through the job description and tell me what you meet and what you don't. And when somebody else kind of questioned it to me and went through it with me and made me realize that it was me stopping me from doing it. It wasn't anything else. It was me. It was my internal dialogue or my inner critic that was saying, don't do it. And I think I can look back and I can think, the society that I was brought up in, the unconscious bias, all of those things. But at the end of the day, it was me saying I wasn't good enough. It wasn't anybody else saying that. And I do in my role, I talk to a lot of schools and students and younger women about my career path and about this decision that I made. And because I don't want other people to to go through that and maybe not put their hand up or that application in. I want young women to look at a job like CEO of One Girl and think, great, I could do that. I'm going to put it in, and not even question whether they should, not because they don't meet the criteria, but because they don't think they're good enough, or they don't think they are a CEO or anything, a boss of any description or a team member of any description. That's not the way that society is going to get the best people into the best roles.
Yeah, and I think that's what I love so much about this whole concept of breaking the good girl rules. And as you wrote in your blog about breaking the mold, is this idea of putting down these preconceived ideas about who we are or who we should be, and embracing, you know, I guess our intuitive sense and idea about who we really are at our core, and following our desires and following our joy. And like, I absolutely love, like, you seem to have this beautiful common theme, you know, that of kind of like saying, like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I really want to learn. Like, it's such a fantastic perspective to have, and an attitude to have about life that kind of opens up doors and opportunities, and also accepting that vulnerability. Like, I don't know what I'm doing here, but I'm willing to give it a shot.
And I think it's so important, because I'm the CEO of my organization, but I'm not expected to know everything or do everything. And so, you know, it's looking at all the people that make up my team together. We know a lot. We are all still learning, and, you know, we're definitely not kicking goals every time. We're learning, we're making mistakes, we're learning from that, and hopefully we're succeeding the next time or the time afterwards. But I'm not responsible for running every single part of One Girl. And it's looking at the fact that, yes, I may be the CEO, I may be the person on the podcast or in the media or sitting in the board meeting and being held accountable, but I don't know how to post Facebook ads. I don't know how to, you know, there are so many parts of One Girl that I know enough of. I know enough to kind of ask questions of the team and support them when they need support. But that's the whole point of having a team around you, is that you hire people who are way more skilled and experts in their field, because that's not what being a CEO and a leader is all about. It's about enabling them to be able to do their job. And I think that's a really key thing of being in a leadership position as well. Not taking that all on yourself, but trusting the people around you.
And I think that's something that's happening internationally. We're seeing this idea of leadership change. And you mentioned in your blog about having this traditional idea about what being a CEO meant. And you had on there quoting, you know, look smart, sound impressive, be one of the boys and kiss your life goodbye. And we have this kind of like really power hungry, you know, hold no prisoners kind of concept about being a CEO. But you had some really beautiful reflections on what it actually meant for you. And, you know, as you were saying, redefining leadership as a team sport was one of them. And having that vulnerability of talking about how being a CEO can get really lonely, and, you know, how you went about trying to create your own network so you had this support system. So what else? What else has, you know, how have you redefined being a CEO?
I think it's that vulnerability that you mentioned, that it's okay to not know everything, and it's okay to ask questions. And it's okay to sit in a meeting, and even, you know, with all members of my team, no matter what seniority or anything they are, and for me to say, sorry, can you just explain that? I'm not really sure what that means. Or I'd love to know more about this particular thing that you're working on. Can you please take me through it? And I think as well, it sets up that safe space for everybody else to feel comfortable to say that, because there's no point in somebody sitting in a meeting not knowing what's going on, because they're not going to be able to contribute. And so I want to be able to make sure that I'm modeling what I want the office to be like, and that's an environment in which everybody feels comfortable to put up their hand and say, "Oh, sorry, can we step back a moment? I'd love if you could explain this a bit better for me or differently," or, "Look, this is a bit left field, but I've got a great idea. Do you mind if I put it forward?" And I think that's really important for me to model that. But creating a workplace that is flexible for everybody and it meets everybody's needs in terms of that work-life balance, and that needs to. I've done a lot of work at One Girl to create that through a few different ways. One of which is, making sure we've got quite progressive HR policies that enable people to have, flexibility in their work, whether it's, working a condensed schedule so they have a day off, or choosing their own start and end times. And I really need that because I have a kid. And so for me, it's really important to be able to spend time with her, and rather than just be in the office all the time. But likewise, everybody needs that. They might have a choir that they're part of after work, or want to go and meet friends, or, it's exactly. Yeah, so that's really important. But so policies is one side of it, because at least the framework's there. But on the other side, I really need to be modelling that. And there's no point if I'm saying to everybody, have work-life balance, and then I'm in the office until 7 o'clock at night and sending emails at all hours, and people can see that I'm working 24 hours a day, but I'm saying to them something completely different. And so it's really important for me to say, you know what, it's time to go home, everybody. Or is this super important? Can we just do it tomorrow? Take the time, refresh, and let's come back to it with fresh eyes. And that's something that is difficult as a CEO, because there is a lot of work. But it's also kind of taking control of, again, it comes back a little bit to what I was saying before. There was nobody but me stopping me from applying for the job. And in a lot of what I do, there's nobody but me making me work at night, or not come in. Like, it is my responsibility to say, you know what, just close your computer, Sarah, go home, have dinner with your partner. And that is really important. And it's something that I find is easy to get lost when you're busy and you feel the responsibility of running an organisation.
I remember when I first got pregnant and I was working for an international fashion company, and I remember, everyone was asking, "Oh, are you taking time off? Are you going on maternity leave?" And, the company didn't have any maternity leave policy. And so, I basically said, "Oh, look, I'm probably taking maybe 3 months off, 6 months off, and then I'll have to come back to work." And I was met with all of this judgment, and I was told literally, it's not the exact quote, but this woman actually said to me, "You don't deserve to be a mother," because I was going to work. And so we had, I think women do face this kind of opposing ideas of, you have to choose. It's either motherhood or career. Like, can you do both? And if you do both, it's difficult, it's challenging. And, if your child's sick, trying to ask for a day off work, or, if they've got an appointment at the dentist or the, orthodontics, or the pediatrician, or whoever it is that you've got to see, the guilt that's involved for so many women in saying to their bosses, "Look, I need time off for my child." Yeah. And even having worked in companies where women would go on maternity leave, and, our boss would, they would say, "Oh, yeah, of course your job's open for 12 months, that's the law." But they would make it impossible for that person to come back. So they're like, "Well, unless you can come back at the same capacity, then you're not filling the job requirement. You can't do your job." And, there are all sorts of little ways that, companies can push women out and use pregnancies and maternity leave and motherhood as an excuse. And even for a lot of single mothers, I hear it so often. So many single mothers will say to me, it's one of the reasons I got turned down for a job, Or you want mummy hours is, one of the terms that gets used. You want mummy hours. So there's so much, this beautiful, I think that's why we need so many more female CEOs who understand life. And you know what? Men need it too. Men need time off work to be able to look after their children.
They need time to be a dad.
Their fathers.
No, absolutely. One Girl's we're a values-led organisation. So we have our values and we use those to make decisions and to set strategy and to communicate. And we reflect on them and all the time in the office. And one of the things for us when we were looking at flexibility in the workplace and making sure for both men and women that it meets everybody's needs for that flexibility and that ability to be home with their family or their friends is that we work overseas trying to make life fair and equal for girls and young women. And we give them all the tools, we try to give them all the tools and skills and resources that they can have so they can make decisions about their own lives. They can make decisions in their household, that they can make decisions about their own bodies and when they're going to have children and what that means for them and the people around them. Yeah. And so we should be doing that here for our own staff as well. There's not one thing that we do in Australia, one thing that we do in Sierra Leone and Uganda. We have to approach it in the same way. And sometimes it means different things in practice just because of the different contexts. But, it's the same thing as making sure that we're paying our staff appropriately here. And particularly in the development sector, the community sector, it's a very female-dominated sector in a lot of parts of organisations. And it's a historically quite a low-paid or underpaid sector. And we want to make sure that the people who work for One Girl are appropriately paid for the work that they do, because a lot of them are young women and they shouldn't be penalised for working in the community and development sector because they're doing something good. They still should be paid because they're doing great work and they're valued. And this is
they're out there changing the world. They kind of should be paid accordingly.
Exactly. And so I think it's, and that's men and women. Anybody who works in the organisation, we have a kind of a pay structure that acknowledges that, and trying again to get around the gender pay gap, even within our own kind of small microcosm of One Girl. But it all comes back to that, making sure that everybody has those equal opportunities. And doesn't matter whether you're taking time off for parental leave, you're male or female, that, you need time to focus on something else in your life, that's something that we try to enable, because we know that, actually the time that you are in the office, you're going to give as much as you can because you find meaning and happiness in the work that you do while you're at One Girl.
Yeah, and I think as well, creating that gratitude for your workplace, that it's not just, trading your service for money, but that you're actually getting this, culture and this beautiful safe space to be able to thrive in and use your brain and give back to the world. And that's actually supporting you on more levels than just as a monetary exchange. And that's also allowing you to have this beautiful personal life.
Yeah, absolutely. And we try to make it fun while you're there. It's one of those things where it's
fun, that's for sure.
And that's it. It's you want people to want to turn up to work in the morning, and we've just launched our Do It in a Dress campaign for 2019, and if you haven't seen it, it's this really fun kind of campaign that we run. It's our kind of major campaign of the year, where you put on a school dress, choose a challenge. Some people jump out of planes, other people, just wear their dress to work every day. So whatever fits into your life, and you raise funds and awareness for girls' education that supports our One Girl programs. And it just, to me, I just love the campaign so much because it really reflects who we are at One Girl, and not just who we are in terms of the staff, but the whole community of One Girl. Because you're not giving anything up or sacrificing anything other than, in some cases, your dignity as a grown adult wearing it. But aside from that, it's this really fun visual reminder that all girls should have the opportunity to put a school uniform on as well. And that to me just embodies kind of this positivity and the fun of, you know, trying to make social change can be fun, and we can do it in a way that celebrates the positive aspects of it and the absolute incredible things that happen when you do things like ensure girls can get an education. And it's not just these amazing things that happen in her life, but the lives of everybody around her and the whole world. And that can be a really fun thing to work towards.
Yeah. Can you share any stories of like some of the, I guess, cases that you've had that you've been able to see the results, like see the amazing impact that one girl is having on these young girls' lives?
Yeah, it's really amazing. So I was in Sierra Leone last year. I've worked in Uganda previously for another organisation, so I haven't been there while being One Girl CEO, but I've seen Uganda and lived there for a little while. But I've never been to Sierra Leone or anywhere in West Africa before. So it was really amazing for me to kind of visit, to experience just a small snapshot of Sierra Leone and the culture, and see our programs and meet the girls. And a lot of the girls I'd heard so much about, I'd heard about them personally. So it was just fantastic to kind of be welcomed into kind of their school and their community and talk to them directly. But one of the things we do is we run a scholarship program. So it's simply just trying to get girls into school and helping them overcome barriers such as financial barriers of their parents don't have enough money to just get them into that classroom. And then we give them everything they need to succeed while they're in there, which, you know, school uniforms, school books, sanitary pads, a solar lamp so they can study at night. So we're trying to give them all opportunities to succeed when they're there. And we also give them access to our other programs, so financial literacy training and menstrual hygiene management and everything else. And the really amazing thing is I met a bunch of young women who had gone through our scholarship program, had graduated high school, and now formed part of our alumni. And just their passion to give back and still maintain these links with other girls who had gone through the One Girl program. So they've set up their own businesses. They're making soap, or one group of young women were making soap, which they were then selling back to schools and other international development organisations in the community to create an income. And then that income was going back into supporting more girls to be able to go to school or purchase sanitary pads or anything else. And so it was that giving back, which was really amazing to me. And they then we're now actually doing this, but when I spoke to them in November, they really wanted to organise themselves to be like more formalised mentors and role models for the younger girls who were still at school and going through the program as well. And knowing that they'd been in that situation and they felt that they had a lot to give back and to act as kind of role models and guide those other girls through the situation they were in.
But isn't that so beautiful? Like, isn't that exactly what even a CEO should be? That kind of mentor and that guide, that someone who's like, yep, I can be here, or let's find the solutions together. Or, you know, even like as a coach, like with our clients, it's not always about having the answers, but about helping them find the right questions so that they can find the answers and they can find the resolution and, you know, find the solutions for themselves, which is so much more empowering.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's it. All of our programs are what we say that they're girl-led and they're participatory. So the girls are involved in our program right from the start, or all of our programs right from the start in terms of the design, but then all the way through the program. So girls really take a leadership role in the implementation of the program as well. In the out-of-school components of our programs, we run girls' clubs, and the girls' clubs are led by girls. They make bylaws, they run the meetings, we have people there to help facilitate, but they're the ones leading it. And so as part of even, you know, we give them training on financial literacy and running a business and all of these kind of hard skills. But everything else we're doing is supporting leadership and decision making and confidence building and public speaking, and those are the things that are really making a huge impact in these girls' lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
I am just bowled over by this.
So what's the
fantastic.
then with being a mother? Like, what are the things that you're learning along the way that you're like, you know what, I need to bring this into my own home, or I need to bring this into the relationship that I have with my child? Like, oh yeah, these are the values. Because there's so many things that, you know, like our children grow up in a very privileged world, and there's so much stuff, like all the beautiful things you were talking about teaching young girls, you know, in Sierra Leone. It's like, wow, I wonder if my children actually get that in a privileged society.
Yeah, it's hard. My daughter's 3, and so
She's not into public speaking yet.
Oh, look, she will be, let me tell you.
Yeah.
She will be. She's told me before that she's the CEO of One Girl. I'm like, I do not doubt it. No. But we really try, you know, she's 3, but she knew that I went to Sierra Leone last year, and I tried to talk to her about that people have different lives than her. And I just try to get a little bit of that across to her even now, that, you know, when we talk about, you know, she has a mum and a dad who live under the same roof as her, but not everybody has that, and families look different. That, you know, she might have friends that just have one mum or one dad or 2 mums or 2 dads or 2 different families, and that I want this to be normal for her, and I want it also to be normal for her to know that she comes from a very privileged household and society, and not everybody has that, and the work that she can do right from now, all from through her life, to support other people elsewhere. And I really think that everybody's on their own journey, and so some people are able to make tangible difference in other people's lives as part of their job, like, you know, like I do. Other people give money. Other people just talk to their friends and family about the issues that they're passionate about. But all of that counts, and all of that has a role to play. And I want her to kind of have that awareness that it's the little things that you do as well as the big things that can make positive change in the world.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the important things and values that we have for this podcast as well, is it's about creating these talking points and inspiring other people to have the conversation, and to bring the conversations, you know, out from the closets and, you know, around the dining room table, that they become normal conversations. I remember once sitting at home and I was showing my girls on the iPad, I can't remember which country in Africa it was, but just about my daughter come home, and they've got a little boy in their class who'd come from this country in Africa. And there was a few issues going on. So we said, well, let's have a look at where he's come from, and let's get some understanding and compassion around this. And so we were going through and we were watching, and, you know, it was one of the countries that had, you know, a lot of you know, famine and conflict going on. And my daughters were like, wow, Mum, this is really sad. Like, you know, I can't believe that this was, you know, this is his country. This is where he's kind of started to grow up. And I had a friend come over, and he had children of a similar age, and he came over and he's like, oh, what are you guys watching? And we showed him, and he was like, why are you showing that to your children? Like, he was absolutely horrified. He was like, put that away. They don't need to know about that stuff. And I was like, yeah, they do. Like, I'm not trying to depress them. I'm actually trying to inspire them and open up their heart space, and that compassion and that willingness to understand that they are powerful enough to have an impact on this world. And we all are. And like you said, it can just be by having the conversation. It can be by donating money, or it can be by physically, you know, flying overseas. You know, they have what was it, when the tsunami in Thailand, and they had all the volunteers going over and helping to clean up Thailand. There's so many beautiful ways that people can help, on a daily basis, or even if it's finding a lost dog on the street and having compassion for it and calling the rangers and trying to help the dog, or helping the man who falls over in the middle of the supermarket pick up his grocery shopping. Like it's all of that. And I think it's so beautiful to create a community or workplaces and, companies that have these beautiful values and foundations under them that we, can sort of spread out into our families, into the everyday life, into our everyday relationships. I just love it.
Yeah. And I mean, we were talking earlier about female role models. And that's the other thing I really try to do with my daughter is make sure she's surrounded by strong female role models. You should see her bookshelf. It's like a feminist library, but with pictures. But making that normal, that she reads about women doing fantastic things all around the world. And that to her is just normal. And we, if we're talking about a firefighter, we say firefighter, not fireman or policeman. Or, if we're playing a game and there's a doctor, the doctor just could be a woman just as much as it could be a man, to try to get over these things that we're brought up just in our language that show that men are in those jobs and women aren't. And it's really hard because, even I grew up thinking, with a fireman and a policeman. And so my language, it takes me a lot to make sure that I'm not saying that to her. But it's really important for me that she grows up in a world that it's, you don't go into little buckets just because you identify as a particular gender.
Yeah, so true. Absolutely true.
I'm really
just having those role models you were talking about is so important. I know my girls have been reading the Goodnight Stories was it Goodnight Stories for Fierce Girls?
For Rebel Girls.
For Rebel Girls, yeah. And it's a brilliant podcast as well. I think that one's called Fierce Girls Podcast, and about all these amazing stories. And I think it's Australian based. So there's a lot of this mainly Australian women like Edith Cowan, who in WA we've got universities named after her, but no one knows who she is. It's kind of really crazy when those kind of things kind of hit you and you're like, oh my God, like, why don't we know who these women are? Why have we not heard about all of these women? Like, where are they? They're missing. They're not in our history, and history is so much dominated by men.
Yeah.
Their stories of accomplishment and achievement and success. And you're like, well, hang on, like, women have achieved some really awesome things too. Where's that?
Yeah. No, it's breaking this cycle.
Yeah. So what else has being a CEO as a female sort of taught you in your everyday life? Like, what advice would you give to, other women or even, young girls around you who are looking for that something more, looking up to, to be able to step up and make an impact on the world?
I think it's looking at, I think one of the things that, it's a hard job. It's a lot of, it is a lot of responsibility and a lot of work, but I really believe in what I'm doing. And I really believe in what I'm doing in girls' education. And I really believe in the work that One Girl specifically is doing to support girls' education. And so that makes a huge difference to me when I'm, when I am stressed, or when I look at my to-do list and think, that's a fair bit of work on there. It comes back to, I'm really working in an area that I'm passionate about. And I say this to schools when I go and talk to them. I'm like, if you're passionate about being an accountant, be an accountant and look at what else you can do to support. Maybe it's doing some pro bono accountancy work for a charity as well, on top of everything you do. Not everybody has to work for a not-for-profit in the way that I do. But it is looking at trying to have a large part of your life that is doing something that you love. because that really makes a difference when the work is hard, and when it is stressful. And the other thing that I had to really learn this when I was doing more emergency response work, and I was team leader for emergencies and really, in typhoons or earthquakes, or, field manager, or in some position of management and leadership, and chaotic environments where decisions had to be made really quickly, and you don't get to choose your team. You're kind of thrown into a situation and just as other people are, and having to make decisions that either aren't always popular, but also ones that just need to be made, and need to be made sometimes quickly. And so it's taken me a while to firstly learn how to still be collaborative in those environments, and still take the time to get other people's perspectives and opinions, but also know that sometimes once that's been done, I still need to make the decision, and be confident that sometimes a decision just needs to be made. And you can and and worry and all of that stuff, but if you make a decision and then have processes in place to learn from that, and if that decision wasn't the right one, how can it be the right one next time? That's a really important thing that I've had to learn. I think is really important when you're in a leadership position, to and especially for young women, to really become comfortable with, because sometimes it can be really difficult to make decisions when you might be the youngest person in the room, or you might be making decisions where you're questioning your own self-worth of being there. But thinking, I'm in the room, I need to make my voice heard. It's not just enough to be in the room. I need to be in the room and talking, and, making sure that my decisions are playing a role in the work that I'm trying to do. And I think that's a really important thing particularly for young women, but for anybody, to kind of have the confidence to do, because you're only going to improve if you kind of keep stepping forward one foot at a time.
And I think that's such an important point. And, you've touched on this a few times about that willingness to make mistakes, and then just to see it as feedback instead of getting emotionally entangled in, the self-worth or the guilt or the shame about making, the not so great decision. And be willing to kind of see, okay, so where is the feedback? What didn't quite go right? If we made that decision again, what would it be? And then how can we implement that moving forward? And that's such a more empowering way of, I guess, I don't want to say of making mistakes, but it's such an empowering way of learning from our mistakes instead of falling into so much shame or guilt or remorse or, I guess, victimhood. About the mistakes that, we all make mistakes.
It is much more empowering than just wallowing in failure.
Yeah.
Yes. And one of our values at One Girl is that always learning. And it's just that taking control of, like, we are all learning in this. And no matter how experienced you get, you always should be learning, because things are always changing. The world isn't a static place. And so, making sure, and again, coming back to that sort of setting up as a leader, setting up that safe space for people to kind of put their hand up and be like, oh, I did this. It did not go well. What can we do about it? Making sure that everyone feels comfortable to do that, because as a team, then we can kind of rally around and be like, okay, well, what happened? How can we change this? How can we improve it for next time? Because that's how we grow.
I can imagine me being a CEO and around like the board meeting tables, if someone was like, okay, I did this and it did not go good, and be like, right, Tim Tams, get the Tim Tams out.
Yep.
Let's knock this out. Got the chocolate.
Yeah, well, look, we do it in a dress at the moment. We have quite a few volunteers in the office, and we've got a big box full of chips and Tim Tams and lollies and everything for the volunteers. And then we have a donation box for the staff if they want to, go and to raid the volunteer sweet box. And we are making quite a bit of money from that donation box and buying quite a lot of replenishments for the sweet box.
Nice.
You probably wouldn't be at this moment yet, but we were, when our kids were younger in pre-primary, you'd have to do the fundraising. So your child would come home with this, like, $50 worth of chocolate and Freddo frogs you'd have to sell. We would literally just like hand back the $50 to the school and shove it at the top of the fridge and be like, right, well, we're sorted for the next month.
Yeah, we definitely did that too.
Yeah, all right, I definitely have that to look forward to.
I'm really curious, Sarah, out of all of the amazing things that we've chatted about, who do you look up to as a role model?
Oh, that's it's an interesting one, because I think I've got lots of different types of role models, and I think this is something that's only come to me in the last few years. I think growing up, I definitely didn't have a lot of female role models, and I think I looked at Natasha Stott-Despoja when she was leader of the Democrats, and a couple of people like her, but there was just very few women out there when I was younger that I could in areas in which I was particularly interested in, and so for me now, it's looking at other CEO women in the international development sector. So CEOs of Oxfam, Care International, Plan, or Care Australia, Plan Australia, those organisations that are headed by strong women, and because they're working in similar, much bigger organisations, but in the similar field in which I am, and they're doing fantastic work. And so looking at them and looking at their leadership style, and they're not the same people as me, so taking of what I can take from them, but where I also might differ from them too, which I think is just as important. But looking around, looking at people like Michelle Obama, that is a really almost cliched role model answer, but she's just so genuine and authentic and passionate about the work that she does, and passionate about enabling other people to be able to, really lead change in their own lives. And I really love the fact that, in some way she has become as well known in some ways because of her husband was in that role. Yeah. But she's her own person. And she's created this space for herself to be such a strong role model, and not even a female role model, just role model for everybody internationally. And she speaks with such heart and authenticity. And that, to me, is just something that I really try to do, is continue to be me and be authentic in everything I do. And so somebody like her, I think, is just such a powerful role model for people, for young women all over the world.
Yep, so true.
And at the same time, she's a mum. She doesn't shy away from that, and she talks about that. And I think that's a really nice thing, that she brings together all parts of her life, rather than just say I'm a mum, or I'm a successful lawyer, or I'm a successful I run a foundation now. That all parts of that are what make her.
Yeah, and I think
love
that's
that
so
holistic
true in
approach.
terms of, like empowering women. Like, we're not just a mother, we're not just an employee, we're not just an employer, we're not just a CEO. Like, there's so many different parts of us and so many different aspects of us, and to be able to honour every single part of who we are and bring all of us to the table, is just such a beautiful, empowering process. And it's just so important. And I think that's one of the reasons, like, we really, we're so excited about having you here and talking to us, because you obviously, you're obviously a CEO, and you're also a mother. And, I just love that part of your blog, about making it home in time for dinner. And, I remember growing up, my stepfather used to he was a real estate agent. And so he was always, sort of not at the dinner table because he had to go out and sign someone up, or he had to take a phone call, or, Sundays he would go do auctions, or, whatever else, home opens. And that kind of, feeling like if you're the main breadwinner, or if you're in a career that's, sort of has status or power, or, is it some kind of, I don't know what the word is, like an upper level, and that we have to sacrifice our family for that. And
Mm.
I love seeing role models out there who are like, actually, it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
And that is so important.
And I'm in a relationship where my partner, he works for a company, for an organization that he's got flexibility in his work as well. So, we have the privilege of, I do drop off for her, my daughter at daycare in the morning and get to work sort of 9:30ish. He starts much earlier than I do, and he leaves at 4 or 3:30, 4 o'clock, and picks her up and gets her dinner. And so, I am really lucky in that situation in which I have that flexibility in my life, and I have a partner who also has the flexibility with his work, that we can manage, getting home for dinner and doing all of that. And I really appreciate that that's not something that everybody has. That I am in quite a privileged position in my life to be able to have that.
Wow.
So who cooks dinner more in your household, you or your husband?
Well, I will provide the whole story. So I cook dinner much more than he does. He gets my daughter's dinner ready, which, is microwaved vegetables and, but he cleans. So we definitely,
Awesome.
definitely the cleaner one in the household. And I think there's many, many more bathrooms being cleaned by him than there are by me, but many more dinners being made by me than there are by him. So it definitely evens out. And
I like that balance.
Yeah, I'd prefer to do the cleaning than the cooking than the bathroom cleaning, to be honest.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for spending time with us and jumping on as an extremely busy CEO of an amazing foundation. I would just absolutely love the work that One Girl does. And you've just said that you've got your drive coming up, the Do It in a Dress.
Yes, we launched it you can do it any time of the year, but we really encourage people to do it we launched it at the beginning of September, so September and October, because it's just fantastic when you start to see people all around Australia putting on that school dress and getting out there in their lives and, talking about girls' education. So September and October, International Day of the Girl is on Friday, October 11th. So if you're going to put on that school dress, one day of the year, International Day of the Girl, Friday, October 11th is the day to do it. And people can find out more on our website at onegirl.org.au.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I've loved having a chat with you today. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sarah.
Brilliant. See you later.
Hey, if you want to continue this conversation, head over to our Facebook page and be part of the revolution. You can find us at Good Girls Don't Podcast on Facebook. Please note we cannot create change alone. Your support, likes, comments, shares, and iTunes reviews will help us to give a voice to the insanely inspirational women and the controversial issues that we discuss.
If you'd like to be a part of our podcast, or if you have an issue that you have a burning desire for us to bring into the light, please contact us. With fierceness, Ashley
And Verity.
Get ready for the revolution.